if we do a crude history of London spoken word, right?
Bring it. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do.
Trust.
Because we are the authority, therefore whatever we're saying is fact. This is pure, cold, hard facts. The London scene cannot be disputed. We are the historians. We know everything. Hello and welcome to the Process Podcast. I will figure out intros when I'm bothered to. I mean, that's like too organised and planned, and I am not an organised and planned person, but I have planned a guest for you. See, segues. Seamless. I'd want to say even rehearsed. No, this is just all off the cuff because I'm that kind of a person, but what's not off the cuff, like I said, planned guest, as we have finally got in the Repeats Beat poet themselves. It is PJ!
And the crowd goes wild.
I mean, don't tempt me. I'm trying to make this as little editing effort as it can be, but there's definitely like sound effects. A crowd coming here could do that. It's an easy one.
I feel I deserve that level of welcome. No.
You deserve that level of editing and all that.
No, it's good to be here. It's been. I'm a fan. I am legitimately. I watched Demi's episode, then I watched Antonia's episode, and I was like, oh, you know what? I do not get to sit and chat with you enough and to really get into stuff and really chop it up. And I've known you for a long time and I love the opportunity to chat. So here I am.
Well, yeah. As I've been kind of phrasing this or portraying this has been my excuse to both hang out with friends whilst making content, because it's exactly fully my vibe. I've realised and embraced. But in all of this, where did we first meet is the basically what I'm trying to go to. I'm assuming there was something poetry. Let's come up with what was the first poetry thing we met at, maybe I forget what you heard. I'd assume something like that, because I feel like it was during that time when it was me, you, Jake, Daisy, all of us going gigs. Again, I know I haven't mentioned everyone's name. That's not because I don't remember you. It's just I'm not listing everyone because that goes into a stupidly long list of everyone that came to events. But I feel it would have been around that time when we'd have crossed paths the first time.
I definitely, yeah. So I had a long think about this on the train over, and I think it was when I first came to University of East London. So that would have been September 2013, 14, or September 2015, I think it would have been 2015, 2016, one of the two. And I went to Forget What You Heard because there was a person on my English course who was like, oh, I like spoken word, let's find a night and go. That was the first, he'd already knew about it. He had a friend who had already been. And so I want to say, and it was the first month of uni, so September or October 2015, I want to say, which seems like a hell of a long time ago, Tyrone.
I mean, that would be putting it into the 8-year category at this stage.
Yeah, what's happened? Wow, I fully on just sort of count up the years. But yeah, no, and it was great. I met so many people in this super energetic, caring, almost saccharine sweet sort of intensity of earnestness and all this vibe.
Almost too earnest at times, but yes.
Exactly, almost too earnest at times, but it was people that weren't afraid to be that earnest and also to be that dedicated to what they were doing and trying to do. And so if it was Forget What You Heard, then I'm not surprised, and I think it would have been.
Yeah, because especially if it was 8 years, it would have been just before Boomerang had started, because Boomerang was a little Boomerang, yeah, this would be Boomerang's 8th year this year, so it would have been before Boomerang. And yeah, I can't, because I feel like my first poetry night when I was I wouldn't do poetry for longer than that, but my first proper London scene nights that weren't just Jacobs put me on a bill somewhere would have been Camden Hammer and Tongue.
Yep.
Which is where I think I met Jake the first time.
Yep.
And then from that went to Boomerang and Forget on the back of that and meeting them there.
There was also the Farrago.
I didn't do Farrago for ages.
Slam.
I didn't do Farrago for ages. My first experience for Farrago was the year that Toby won it. So couple of years after that.
Yeah, there was also Bang Said the Gun.
I've never been to a Bang.
You never went to Bang Said the Gun?
Never went to a Bang. I've been to the Roebuck. I've not been to a Bang.
Because the Roebuck used to do Hammer and Tongue Waterloo.
No. Hammer and Tongue Waterloo was at the Horse and Stable in Lambeth.
Okay.
I mean, so spoiler alert for this podcast, me and Peter are going to go and throwing it back and doing lots of in mad bullshit. So
it's already started. Although, to be honest, this is the timeline section, and so this is where it's most likely to happen.
Well, no, officially the timeline section is starting now. Insert card here, Tyrone.
I love the asides. I love the little. By the way, editing Tyrone.
It's again. I know I'm a self-aware is not the one. I'm a meta person. That's more rather than self-aware. Self-aware is a different, I think, vibe.
We see behind the curtain, though.
Yes. I'm meta. I know what the editing is going to be like. As much as I want to be in the moment for a lot of stuff, there's always in the back of my head for every single podcast episode, there'll be a bit of like, is this current moment funny enough for the intro? Is this a good... And it's viewing it a lot like that and seeing that. I'm not quite at the stage of, this will make a good 10-minute clip. I'm not quite there yet, but...
You also have a sense about this in your poetry as well, though. Like, you're always live editing and thinking about what the reaction is going to be of a thing when you perform. And I've seen it in how you like prep and then deliver asides within your poems.
I think I'm definitely more with that for hosting than I am with the performing.
Fine. But also in both.
I mean, like, performing, I have a little bit of it, but that's more a thing of like, grind my gears. Here are the 4 parts where I'll do definite asides here. So let's pay attention to what's happening in the room. Can you reference that? Hosting them definitely more of a actively what's been going on here because I need to respond. I can't go up hosting every 5 minutes. So let's try and stay in the room and stay present. And I think going back to Forget What You Heard, one of my favorite hosting moments ever was still one of the Forget What You Heard nights where, for whatever reason, there was just a few like sexually abused traumatic poems back to back to back, and Rick and Matt called an audible, and it's like, cool, we're only 3 poets in now. We're going to have a break. We're going to have a 10-15 minute break just because we need to. And that's so one of my favourite hosting moments I've ever seen of like, yes, we know we've got a pattern and schedule and timings for the night, but no, we need a break now.
Yeah.
We can hear what's going on in the room. We'll do that. And like, I aspire to be that level of in the room, whatever.
I definitely think that my hosting is almost in a large part owes so much, especially my early development as a host, from watching like Matt Cummins and Rick the Most at Forget What You Heard at Ryan's Bar from, like 2015 through to 2018-ish, maybe a bit earlier than that, I think it ended. But it was definitely 18 months of Forget What You Heard, and there were other nights. There were nights like, just many other nights I'll get into, but specifically about Forget. They had a care and a sensitivity to what people needed, and it was never too much. It was never out of the ordinary for them to do something to help everyone feel more at home.
Yeah.
And that was just such an important feeling. Like, it was a wonderful feeling getting off the bus in Stoke Newington and knowing that I was going to a Forget What You Heard night. Because even after I stopped going with the initial friend who initially brought me, I found a whole new set of people who I was excited to see. I was excited to be writing new things and to be like spitting bars and like really pushing myself and thinking, what would it sound like if I tried this or I tried that? And everyone was doing that. And we were not only encouraged to, but it was like being reminded of your own ability. And it's almost like people say, oh yeah, I was empowered to do this. No, you were enabled in your own power to do this. People remind you that you have the power to to do this thing. And so watching Matt and Rick adapt their nights. And so it wasn't a particularly accessible venue. It was downstairs, at a pub with a nice little small basement garden sort of bit out the back, and then a ledge to get up to the stage, and they would hang up the big banner, which was signed by everybody who's ever featured.
More need banners. More poetry needs banners. That's definitely a thing we're missing.
It's such a simple trick because it's a visual thing. Anyway, within all of this, what I want to talk about is essentially like how Matt and Rick made accessibility both on a emotional accessibility level and also physical accessibility. They would do whatever they could to get people who were wheelchair users, people who had mobility issues. Although it wasn't accessible, they would make their night accessible for these people, and they felt welcome. And this happened multiple times where you would realize, oh yeah, this night's going to be a bit different because we're adapting to the needs of the people who are here. And that was a thing that everybody agreed upon as an audience. And it was like a feedback thing because you see Matt and Rick doing it as hosts, and then you think to yourself, well, this is the space we're creating. Let's do this. And this is what it should be. Like, we should be able to affirm the humanity of anybody who wants to come to an open mic. That's kind of the job of the open mic, isn't it? You know, it's like, as long as you can, not even if you, whatever, however you can be involved, you should be able to be involved. And I feel that really strongly in all of my hosting. And I've tried to make that a core pillar of what I was growing to do with Penting when I was starting to host that, and when I was co-hosting Boomerang with yourself and the crew. I was like, how can we make sure that anybody who walks through this door feels as affirmed in as many parts of their humanity as possible within reason, etc., right? And it's not too much of a thing to dream for. It should be, you know, the modeling of a better way of relating to each other, because we know the world is absolutely fucked, and we know how easy it is for us to play into ideas of commodifying ourselves and fetishizing ourselves. We don't need to talk about how that comes into play in the spoken word scene and in the culture of kind of like, you know, especially slam poetry, you know, and all of this is encapsulated in the poetry night, like, you know, the experience of it. And yeah, I just think that accessibility and emotional sensitivity and keeping people's humanity like front and center, that's the foundation of, it's one of the important core pillars of how to host a poetry night, because it's how to host a space. It's how to help people feel like full human beings, like everyone deserves to feel. I don't like that deserve, but you know, yeah.
I get your point. And like, it was that thing of like, I think especially because I was young when I started doing it, I got a lot of the just like cliche audience work stuff I picked up from Jacob Sam-LaRose.
Yeah.
Man can work a crowd. Man is so lovable and knows what to do and is just natural performance. Again, it's the cliche stuff of like, you can do louder than that kind of thing, but he does it in such an organic way that never feels too forced, etc. And just getting people...
But it's how you do it in your way,
yeah,
and the way that it's right for your audience and for what the night is. Yeah. So like, we can break it down. You do the hey hellos, you do the who's been here, who's not been here, you do the procedural things of this is how the night's going to run. You might do, you know, and look, if I was a comedian, I'd just call it crowd work.
Yeah.
You do crowd work, you know, like it's a full intro to the thing, but it's like a scene setter. And so, you know, at Boomerang, we had the rules. We would always introduce the rules at the start, but you make it part of the culture of the night. And
you have fun with the rules. It's not just reading off it. It's not just reading here as the standard thing. Is that you got fun with how these rules work. It's actually like...
And people think it's so simple. People think it's like, oh no, well, you just like host. But Lord, if you've ever seen a poorly hosted night,
like you can tell when it's poorly hosted. And like, obviously, I wouldn't say easy. Some of it's level of some people that's more natural to it than others. Some people are just naturally are more comfortable on the stage. So that part of it is the easy part and level of some people just don't get that same level of anxiety. That is the closest you can get to it being easy and not easy. But that's not like, oh my God, this is just anyone can do it. It's a more level of I feel comfortable in this space. Like I'm aware that I don't feel that uncomfortable if people are looking to me, paying off me to pay attention. Like, I'm fine with that. And that's the easy part. From that, there's still a lot to do in like having to, like, I think one of the things that I've definitely realised I fell into, despite the very obvious chaotic nature to a lot of what I do, it's also been especially with Boomerang, and even more now a little bit with Process, level of like, I like and fall into playing the straight man a lot.
Yeah.
That has worked. I mean, both literally, but also as the whole concept of it.
It's true.
Is that like, because like, there was like almost that fun of Boomerang of like, I can let you guys be chaotic.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm going to be the one that's like, yeah, cool, Jake, we need to kind of bring the next open mic on. And like, that played into the fun of it, whilst also still being no, but we actually do need to get this mic on. But that was,
and it was a spectrum of like, you know, who was going to be essentially the straightest, most direct. And then who was going to be the most zany and off the wall. And if I had to like put it on the thing, I'd probably say, you're here, the straightest. Maybe Joel next, then me, then AJ, then Jake. That's how it works for me. Joel, but it was really fun.
Joel was always a weird one because Joel's one was definitely a little bit of like, it was more absurd than zany, I think, with Joel all the time. And Joel definitely lives on that absurd side of things. It's like, there's so much about him that is so quote unquote normal. Normal presenting at the very least.
We understand. Normal presenting, what a way to describe someone. Joel, if you're watching, absolutely love you. I don't think you're normal presenting. I think you're the most unique individual human being ever. Tyrone said that.
There's so much normal presenting to Joel. Let's put it this way, more rather than normal presenting, so much to Joel that is not stereotypically artsy creative in that kind of outward way. That's always something like, oh yeah, you're weird. And almost like you can almost not hide the weird, but
it's what identities are minoritized and otherized, and like that's not a thing that you know. It's not a thing that necessarily you get to choose. You know, it might be a thing in one sense and not be a thing in another sense. But what I love about Joel, and in getting back to how we're talking about like hosting and the dynamics of hosting, there's always going to be a way to get in like a really direct, seemingly callous, but it lets everyone have like a moment of like levity when you say something really like brutally, maybe as like a dynamic shift after something else, which is often how it would work with Joel. Like there'd be a moment and then just come in with this like off the wall cutting thing. And normally it was the ending phrase, which was when at the end of every night after we'd all rambled and plugged our stuff and been like, well done to everybody. Because that's another thing. You don't just do the intro stuff, you do the outro stuff. Joel would be like, I love you all. Get home safe. Now fuck off home.
We have stolen that from every single process. Now that's now been the virus. I'm taking. Also, for people listening, watching, whatever, you can kind of tell we've like. I had this plan of like how we're doing this in segments. Fuck the segments. This is just going to be a vibe. Like of all the episodes that were going to be a vibe, this was always going to be the most vibing of all the vibes.
I'm trying to hold it in, but I am just having such a fun time just sitting and chatting to you. But I do know that watching this back, I'll be like, okay, make sure you actually like make coherent, cogent points.
I mean, it's not even a cogent point. It's like a level of like we can talk about your present in the creative thing, or we can just keep talking.
I mean, okay, so timelines, right?
Yeah.
Apart from hosting, we'll go back to timelines. But okay, so if I break down my timeline in my career in spoken word, which sounds like a terrifying thing to say.
Career that you're making all the money off of.
Look, right, not all the money,
but some money.
Some money, and I'm blessed to be, and this is through not just the fact that like I've worked hard and like, you know, talented. It's due to the gifts and the kindness of everybody around me. Like the community is the thing that makes anybody able to earn any money in poetry, because as we know, there's no money in poetry. And so I'm blessed to be able to have, you know, been able to be a semi-professional and professional like poet. But again, back to the timeline. So if it's 2015, 2016 through to like 2017, my first features were in 2017. My first ever group feature, I had a collective feature.
Oh yes, God.
Yeah, that was
Chocolate Poetry, wasn't it?
No, it was Typeface.
No, at Chocolate Poetry.
No.
Oh,
it was in Bournemouth.
Oh, that one first.
It was in Bournemouth.
Cool. So I was thinking the one with the nut allergy first.
Yeah. Am I going to have to commit that story to tape?
You don't have to. Which is just more.
Okay.
You mentioned nut allergy off camera beforehand, so I had that in the back of my head.
Yeah. I have a nut allergy. Long as story short, I'll go back to this. Did a gig, had a satay chicken burger, thought it was a normal chicken burger, was ill. Luckily, the gig was literally 10 minutes walk away from St. Thomas's Hospital. And so I walked into the A&E, had my treatment.
Came back and did a feature.
Came back and did the gig. Absolutely.
Because man is dedicated to the craft.
Exactly. You know, shouts out to Daisy and to Becky and to Dean and to, was Caroline there?
Yeah, I think Cass
Caroline,
was there.
Yeah, Cass was there.
Yeah.
Jay?
Probably was, I just assumed that Jake was all these things that this, I don't.
It was one of those nights where everyone was around, and also my memory is kind of hazy because of the whole nut allergy thing. But anyway,
So, you're for Bournemouth.
Yeah, Bournemouth, and that was my first feature. ever, and it was like it was like a big night, you know. It was like maybe like 100-ish like people in a large pub in Bournemouth, and it was there, and watching people do feature nights across those couple of years while I was still regularly going to many open mics sort of a week on average. It was there where I was starting to see what it would be like to build myself a set. And if we talk about career, obviously it's hard to sort of have key progression points, but you can remember, or you can mark part of your development by maybe there's many different criteria, but for me it was like, right, I need to be able to move from open mics to like doing a set, right? And if I do like a feature set, how do I feel doing that? And then I need to be able to lock down a feature set, right? And fine. And then the next stage, I thought, because what I saw is everyone going to Edinburgh and having their 1 hour show. That was what I thought was the next step. So that was my plan for a while. From 2017, 18, as I was starting to be comfortable doing feature sets, I was like, right, how about I now plan like a solo show? Never happened, but it was a really important part of my development. What actually happened is that there's 101 different ways to progress depending on how you're cutting it. So a lot of people went, and I'm doing this like a progression from poetry. Nobody stops doing poetry.
I mean, it's also
a different package for it.
To jump in here, especially with the think of the whole feature stuff as well, that it's also that thing of like, what is the goal you're trying to even achieve? Like, because at one level, of course, we're progressing for the sake of progression. There's a level of like, because I know for me, for example, there's always been that thing of like, this is the hobby for me.
Very important to make that distinction, yes.
And like, obviously I'm doing it to this level. I don't want to belittle the things I've done. Again, published poet, all that stuff. Like, this is still professional a lot of the time. But the point is the level of like, I don't have I need to do this, that, and the other to make my career work. So the progression has always been a level of, well, this is just a fun thing to do. It's different if we're at a level of like, I want to be either the next blah blah, or I want to start doing this in my poetry. I think that changes what the progression path and what the effort is. So I guess what was there ever like a goal of like, I want to be this person in poetry or this person in creative thing, or was it just progressing because, well, everyone is doing features, so I must do features?
No, it's a really good distinction to make. And no, there definitely was. So like, I was looking at people like, well, just the incredibly few people who were able to seemingly be professional like poets. So K Tempest was like on the rise, and I'm like, well, they're going to be like sick. Scroobius Pip had, I think, just started doing the Distraction Pieces podcast after like coming from spoken word and also doing music and stuff. I was looking at those sorts of people, but because I didn't like the pathway wasn't entirely clear for how to be just a professional poet, but also like this idea of, I was still in the foolish mindset of thinking that there is just a single way to be a professional poet. Whereas meanwhile, there's 100, you know, and there are as many ways as there are people who are consistently making a large percentage of their money through poetry.
Again, it's also in the question of, well, what are we counting even as a fucking professional poet? Like,
yeah, exactly. I mean, for the purposes of just like, you know, having a conversation, I would say if you're regularly being paid to perform or write poetry, like, but whatever. I just think that for me, it was like, how do I figure out what my own criteria for success is? And I was doing that while also knowing that naturally I had a inclination for this thing. I loved it, and I could see how I could see how my skills were growing. I was getting better at writing poems. I was getting at performing my poems. I was getting better at like just interacting with audiences. And so it was like, how do I put those criteria of success into different vehicles of communicating an idea? Around 2015, 16, 2017, I was also doing Poetry at the Pad, which like I was hosting my own poetry night every month. And the thing that made the idea like so important for me was that I would be able to invite features down. They would basically like open mic, feature, and then we'd have a 20-minute discussion after the feature set with the artist to, you know, respond to things, to talk about what was going on in their work. And for me, that was a marker of success. I wanted to be able to facilitate that level of openness in whatever my poetry career would be. I want people to feel as close to that. So that played into my hosting, that played into my involvement with the Lunar Poetry podcast, that played into my involvement in how I approached my live work. and then also in when I went to publish my work, and then my radio work. So do you know what I mean? It's like my criterias are quite they're not dependent upon the poetry necessarily as a vehicle. I can put those same parameters of what I think is success into other like avenues, and it's because I love the world. Also, I love the secondary world around the primary world of poetry. Of course, I love poetry and I love to read it. I love to listen to it. Mostly, it's a pamphlet, an audio book, and YouTube video form for me. And I love that. But I also love interviews with poets and going to poetry nights and what all of that is, because that is essential to it. Like it's what makes it or personalizes it, and it's how I almost brought it into my being from it just being something that I thought was cool and out there, and obviously like, you know, a bit weird, but you know, I was a music kid and I was into lyrics, so it was natural. But yeah, so that's how I saw my idea of progression. It was like, how can I get better at doing and achieving these sorts of things, connections with an audience, like artistic excellence, like just sheer like craft, alignment with essentially like who I am and what I do. Is that reflected in my poetry? Because that's a metric of success as well in my artistry. Yeah, mostly those three, and then earlier on I did think, oh well, I should just do a show that's an hour show, or I should just do an album, or I should just do this, or I should just do that. And I kind of ummed and ahed about loads of these because I'm not sure that actually the vehicle matters entirely to me, because I weirdly enough feel confident in a bunch of arenas. Like I've dipped my toe into loads of stuff, and you know, blessings to everyone who's ever taken like a chance on me. Things have gone relatively well, and I'm very proud of a lot of the work I've produced. But it does mean I've struggled with being the kind of, in my mind internally, jack of all trades, master of none. What is the thing that he does really well? And it's weird. I have this duality of like, oh, you know, look at how far you've come, and this is great, and you know, and I'm so blessed to have had all the achievements I've had, and I'm still going. And on the other hand, because I've always been looking at people who have been able to professionalize, and also I'm looking at the people who I think are the highest of the high and the most excellent. They might be close to me, they might be far away from me, whatever. But I have a problem with like pedestalizing other people and not looking at all the stuff I've done. So I'm trying to redress that balance in my success. And that's why when you talked about timelines, I'm like, it's so weird, because in the one sense, obviously you can look at the time that elapsed, but in the other sense, you can look at how far you've come. Basically, emotional time is different from like physical time. Yeah. And so that my experience has been different. Cool. Yeah.
You know, I think the whole talk about the timelines and all that kind of stuff, a lot of that is so intrinsically linked, unsurprisingly, to the London scene. And without going into such a old man topic of it all, old man vibe of it all, we're still going to now, in our Let's Talk About section, talk about the freaking London scene. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm going to choose London scene rather than poetry scene in general, because whilst I think we are very good at keeping up with what's happening outside of London, I don't want to try and claim any level of authority on that. There's freaking too many events, and like, this is going to be the vain way of saying it. I think we are definitely in the top percentage of people in London that know about the rest of the UK poetry scene.
Yeah, and that also speaks to the awful insularity of like London and the Southeast. Decenter London, decenter it. But for the purposes of this, hey, I'm an Essex East Londoner, so I'm a claim East London and Essex.
Well, almost on that then, like, especially recently then, with you being more based in Essex nowadays, well, I say, with you not living in London 24/7 at the moment, how does it feel not living in London and being part of the scene here? Like, how is that right now?
Yeah. That's very interesting. Because I feel distant, but also I feel like, weird enough, like I've aged out a bit, and that's just odd to me. Sorry.
On Kayla's episode, she spent the whole time trying to get an actually good burp directly into the mic.
I didn't want to. I don't want to burp into the mic. Look, I'm comfortable, but I don't want to be burping into a microphone. Come on, there's standards. I got. Anyway, no, like it's weird. So I moved out in October 2021. Moved back to Chelmsford, and what? So like Chelmsford's 25 minutes away from Stratford.
Yeah.
It's closer to London than most of London is, right?
Yeah.
To Stratford, and so. But it's partially a mentality thing. It meant that to come into a night, you have to just like make an active plan.
Yeah.
You can't, or it's far less likely that you will by chance just be like, what am I doing
it's
tonight?
It's far less likely at 5 o'clock you'll go, you know what, fuck it, that's when in...
Yeah. And that's the thing that I absolutely loved when I was living in London. And obviously Stratford, Leighton, Stone, Walthamstow, Beckton when I was at university. This is just like all of like East London, sort of like Newham all the way into, yeah. And so being out now and also having like got to a point where I still love going to open mics, but my evenings were a bit more time pressured. I feel a tiny bit distant, but also I feel like my legacy. Oh my God, speaking like I'm passed away.
Do it, go for it.
Here we go. Not to overhype myself. And I think also later on in this conversation, we're going to investigate why I have a reticence to like, you know, like own my fucking shit, like, you know, like, and really stand on my truth. But anyway, within all of this, like, I think that I just feel a bit less likely to count myself as an active part of the London scene now. Yeah. Like, even though, you know, hosting Penting, we're currently on hiatus, but I was hosting that. We came back after the pandemic, obviously. I say after the pandemic, after the stricter...
After the height of the pandemic.
After the height of the pandemic and the restrictions, because, hey, it's still going on. But yeah, Penting came back after that, and a lot of nights didn't, you know. A lot of nights also trailed off after that. Audiences are harder to keep, etc. When I was actively doing Penting every month, I would not have hesitated at all over saying I'm an active part of the London scene, even though I'm coming in every month. Whereas now, because I'm not living in London, I'm not running a regular night, and because I have my scale, my parameter again of being part of the London scene, because when I was, that meant for me, 2018, 2019, 2017, that meant I would be at like 2 or 3 nights every week. Like if I was in London, because I'd be like, this is how I get my fucking hugs in. Like, you know, this is how I feel held, and this is also how I keep on doing it.
Oh, this isn't bad, because I now remember fucking podcast episodes and which one was which, but one of these episodes I was talking about the fact that, like, it might have been Antonia's one, but like being part of the London team was the socialising, and that is what you... Yeah. That is how we made a lot of our lives, a level of like, we'll do the day job or the uni work, and then in the evening, you go to Poets Nights and you socialise there, and that was our social interactions. That was our meeting friends whilst doing something.
And it was so beautiful. And like, I don't also starry-eyed glasses this too much, right? Obviously, difficulties, we're all like young and stupid and growing, and, you know, people are careless and people have bad behaviours, etc., etc. I don't want to over-romanticize this time, but for me, and I can only speak to my own like truth, the development of how comfortable I felt in being me as a person in the world on my own terms was so much benefit. I felt so much more comfortable with these people, because we would be able to look at each other for the points and the thoughts that we had in terms of on a microphone and the skills that we had, but then we'd also be able to, you know, have a rushed conversation in the smoking area to be like, I affirm you, I see you as a human. And that just, in a city like London with however many million people, 13 million people or whatever, when you take into account commuters even more, to find your foothold in that swirl and that mass of people is not to be taken lightly. And this is the thing that poetry does so well, I think, in larger cities as well as in smaller places. But it's an interesting factor of open mic, specifically open mic communities in large cities, because it can be that inclusive space. Yeah.
Well, like, I guess now then, like, what... I know you're not necessarily a part of it all the time at the moment now, but what do you make of the London scene? Oh yeah, it's great. Presently presented.
Okay, so it's interesting because if I if we do a crude history of London spoken word, right?
Bring it. Let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do.
Trust. And
because we are the authority, therefore whatever we're saying is fact. This is pure, cold, hard facts. The London scene cannot be disputed. We are the historians. We know everything.
I am an amateur, an idiot. I know nothing.
No. Doctor, a Pete Beat poet.
Oy, not yet. Soon though. Okay, so I what I'm going to draw on genuinely is Pete the Temps, Peter Bearder's fantastic book Stage Invasion, and then also the work of the of Swear, which is the spoken word educators and academic researchers.
Yeah.
And so they also released a book with Routledge, I think just called Spoken Word in the UK, a collection of essays. Claire Trevian, who also used to run Sabotage, they also released a collection of essays about spoken word in the UK. There's been a couple of MAs and PhDs and dissertations, obviously most notably Katie Ailes' PhD on the performance of authenticity in the spoken word culture in the UK. And then, so yeah, basically I'm drawing on these things, but this is purely my thing. So essentially in like the 1967 or the 1960s or 57, whatever, you get the roundhouse poetry happening, which is this big, it's called the Dialectics of Liberation. And it's when Kwame Ture came over, and it's also when counterculture had like a big burst into London. It was obviously down the road from where we are now. It was in the Roundhouse, right? Allen Ginsberg was there. And so from that moment, you get sort of an explosion of beat poetry and poetry happening in like smaller, more... And this isn't, basically, let me not bother about this. But basically, that's like a big key point in the popularization of and mainstreaming of like open mic and spoken word cultures. Then you get, it's bubbling away. You get you get the Liverpool sound and the Liverpool poets as a mass mainstream popular thing. Everyone had that Mersey sound anthology in like the sort of like late, I forget the time specifically, but you get that happening. And this is when the center of poetry moves away from London, because it moves into like the alternative comedy and the punk space. So this is where like John Cooper Clarke comes from, and this is where you get poets happening, getting crossover mainstream success in sort of like of other ways. Then you get to the ranting poets and the sort of political side that was very close to like Alexei Sayle. This is where like Attila the Stockbroker comes from, who was still about today and doing great gigs. And this is, again, it's not a London-centered thing, but it's very, very powerful and present in London because of its interaction with other types of art forms, and also just the type of political activation going on at the time in 80s London, which is like, the police are an occupying force, the social contract is breaking down. Thatcherism is doing what Thatcherism does, right? Everyone knows the price of everything and the value of nothing, the increased financialization of everything. And you get poets kicking against this. So we're in the 80s, and then you get the sort of move from the 80s to the 90s where the sort of ranting poets like drop off a bit. And by that I just mean, well, we can use one person as an example. Janine Booth stopped performing poetry as a ranting poet around this time, 90s wise. Then again, poetry is in an alternative space. It's still a bit underground, but you have the slam poetry boom that happens in Chicago in the mid to late 90s.
No, I think it started in the 80s.
Sorry, 80s.
Because Farrago is roughly speaking as old as I am.
Yeah,
and
fine.
Farrago didn't happen before the slam started. So slams had been late 80s with Mark Smith in Chicago.
Yeah, exactly. And there's many books and documentaries and writing about that. But yeah, so basically, and obviously it doesn't happen instantly, but then slam starts getting over to Europe and the UK in the sort of early to mid 90s.
Because again, as much, there's a whole different conversation on Farrago and John Paul and all of that, but credit where it is due, John Paul is especially responsible for Farrago starting, and I want to say it was 92, the first Farrago.
Yeah, the details are the detail, but we're just roughly talking about the timeline, and as with I think his name is Mark Smith, who set up Slam in Chicago. We are not saying that these people are necessarily good people.
Oh, I mean, there's a whole Cupsy event of Mark Smith that we can go into.
Yeah, and also this stuff is like widely documented and like it's public. It's not like community secrets where people don't understand that like people behave terribly and do like bad things, and we have to be able to assess critically. Like not only, not to pass judgment, but to look at what they are and what their role is in the history of this shared thing, which involves many people and is like a culture and a subculture. So yeah, like the 90s is happening, and by the end of the 90s, what you get is Cat Francois and winning the first ever UK televised slam. This is in 2005. You get Murray Lachlan-Young having a BBC One poetry special, I think, at Christmas. This is also the early mid-2000s. But from that point of the early 90s to the mid-2000s, there's a bit of a lull. There's a bit of a... like slams are happening and they're happening independently and they're like starting to bubble away, but it's still very, very like small culture. It's not permeated the mainstream in a similar way to how it has now. Because obviously what happens across the late 90s and early 2000s, the internet. You know, like the internet is a massive, important vehicle for popularizing and mainstreaming spoken word. And so, yeah, like you get, and obviously there were lots of people and lots of poets who were performing and writing alongside, doing music and were in the music space as well as being in the sort of alternative comedy space. I mean, Tim Key is a poet, and people forget this, but he was starting to do his sort of stuff. I want to say 90s.
This similar timeline for Phil Jupitus as well.
Yeah. Porky the Poet was, that's how he was known back then. And I want to say again, 80s, 90s, the alternative like punk poetry scene alongside people like Attila the Stockbroker, Tim Wells obviously been going through all this time, runs through, London poetry, spoken word like a stick of rock. Yeah, and so Selena Godden as well, obviously, like being a black woman at this time as well, was doing stuff as I think they had Selena Saliva, I think was their performance name. They did a track with Cold Cut in like the 90s. It's great stuff. But yeah, then in the early and mid 2000s, and this is just going from my personal experience, what I sort of was provincially aware of. Not only being born in Essex, I knew Scroobius Pip was from Essex. When they released in 2011, like distraction pieces and like Thou Shalt Always Kill, like Thou Shalt Always Kill was like a top 40 hit that was spoken word. And I'm like, where does this come from? Similarly, the Baz Luhrmann Sunscreen song from the Romeo and Juliet,
like based off an essay, kind of made into a whole spoken word. Yeah, all of that stuff.
Honestly, like that is a great microcosm of early internet viral hits. So this is like 2000 and I think like 8. No. Sorry, yeah, it went viral on the internet then, but it was also a super popular thing when the actual initial film was released. But yeah, so like just there was always examples of spoken word that were in my periphery that I thought was super fucking cool. And I was like, right, how do I figure all this out? But yeah, and that's what led me to want to have a rough mental mapping, even in my own mind, before I even started to really love poetry, to be able to work it all out. I love looking at being able to trace timelines, histories of things.
And like, cause like with all
and then we get to basically, today and the mass explosion of spoken word nights in London. So this is from sort of like 2011, 12, 13, 14.
Well, yeah,
and it hits a sort of peak in like 2018, 19.
2014 when they were starting to happen again, because like the Roundhouse opened up again, and that's when you'd get Jacob Sandler-Rose bringing the Roundhouse poets is the first thing there, and then it brings first the Roundhouse Slam, which is arguably, almost by statistics, one of the most successful slams in the UK. I think that, like,
definitely
on a numbers basis at least. It's
definitely the most credible, I would argue, and like
I'll give you that. Yeah,
one of the most. Let's not speak in absolutes, but.
One of the most credible, and in the same way as well, Roundhouse Poets being one of the most credible workshops. I'm not going to go into is it good, bad, bad, that's a whole different thing. But yeah, you get that, which is also the same time around the same time when you get people like, whilst not coming through it, you get Harry Baker who will go viral with his TED Talks, etc. Like, what was it? Yeah, Paper People just being this thing. I suppose Holly McNeish will explode, etc.
Because button poetry is happening at this time as well, and so I mean, early viral
Shane Khoisan as well.
Shane Khoisan, Neil Hilborn,
OCD. God,
and but this is also coming off the back of Def Poetry Jam, which is the other like massive staple of where I was regularly seeing or could see spoken word. I remember the day that I found out about the Def Poetry Jam archive. There was just a channel on YouTube that had all of the videos. I was like, my God, this is the treasure trove because Sheehan's poem Love Like, I want to love like I want to love this kid Oh, I remember like finding
was
that
it
out.
Raphael Cassell or whatever his name is.
I forget the name.
But like there's a lot of them. There's like what's his freaking teacher? Poet's teacher.
Mark Grist?
No, American poet that's a teacher.
Anish Morgani?
From that time, Taylor someone.
I'm blanking.
I'm just going to annoy me. I'll put a caption in the thing.
Fine. Yeah. And so there's many like
Taylor Marley.
Cool.
There we go.
Okay. Taylor Marley.
So it's going to annoy me. It's going to annoy me.
Yeah, it's because like so this is what I think is another sort of stream into what made the London spoken word scene in sort of the years of, let's just roughly put like the early 2010s into essentially the before pandemic time. So 2011, 12 through to 2018, 19, those years. Like, so you've got this feeding in because around this time, the culture of the culture of slams in the US is popping. Like, this is why it's parodied so heavily in all of the 90s stuff. We've all seen My Wife and Kids has a poetry parody. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air has a poetry parody. These were some of the great poetry parodies before the 22 Jump Street. Cynthia. But they're showing that. And I know you know this, Tyrone, because you had a Poets React video to Poets React to poetry in social media.
But also
popular media.
Also, it's like kind of going on a tangent from this as well, though. Like, I think, again, that's a lot of the culture side of things, but also I think it's on an almost capitalist side of things as well. There was that vibe where when people were coming to poetry nights and in general poetry nights existing, there was definitely a bit of a vibe of like, pubs kind of realize that we've got a function room. We need to get money in here, and poetry nights are cheap as fuck to have it here.
So cheap.
And that is like also what helped them a level of like, well, we need to get people, like, how do we get people into a pub on a Tuesday? Come for a poetry night, and like that is undeniably a thing that's fucking helped poetry, and a thing of like, well, we need to find a thing that goes on here. Comedy nights possibly a bit too hard, and there's a whole freaking not stigma, but like comedy is a whole industry in of itself. Music too expensive to do on a consistent basis.
I don't want to hire another, like, I'd have to hire a sound guy. What about all this equipment, etc.?
Poetry, just give them a mic and they're done.
Hey, a mic. A lot of us didn't even have a mic.
And like that's kind of what kind of legitimately helped spur poetry along a level. Like, once you see one person do it, again, it almost feels like, oh well, you can do it, well then we can all do it.
And also that comes after the 2008 financial crisis, you know what I mean? Like, people have less, and also just essentially bars need to make more money, property prices, it is interesting. Okay, sorry. So basically you have that happening. You have Def Jam as an archive. You also have, people don't talk about this as much, but it's a massive influence. Like churches, spoken word in churches was a big thing as well, especially like in the black church.
Especially American as well, and how much of their poetry is, not saying how many of their poets are faith-based. Poetry itself isn't always faith-based, but American culture is so faith-based, and those teachings, you can see the influence of their of churches in how they perform.
It's, again, the performance style is it's so interesting to note the distinctions in between. So many similarities, but the distinctions are hilarious. The earnestness and the full-blooded constant will be the biggest thing in the room general style of slam poetry in the East Coast of America. Oh my God. It was fantastic because it's not British. It's so not necessarily the British style.
Not to cut you off in this whole timeline thing, but with all of this
let's get
being
back.
said though, we've got the scene where it is nowadays. And like, I think one of the things that's very defined about the London scene, and I'm going to some of my personal opinion, but still one of the things to find about the London scene is that naturally so many people move down to London. You've got so many people that will move to London for work or uni, etc. and all that.
People who are passing through.
Yeah, the people are coming here, and this is almost their first experience of spoken word a lot of the time. With that, a lot don't know the history, and that doesn't affect... So how important do you think this whole history and that thing is to the scene? Because like, there's so many nights that they can't tell you. Like, I've talked to so many people that don't know that Mark Smith's existence, etc. So how important is that history?
Really good question, right? Because I used to be a bit of a purist about many things, hip hop primarily, but I'd be like, no, if you don't know the history, you can't speak on it. Rah, 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 rah. As you can tell, as you can tell, I think that's a little bit ridiculous, especially for open mic and spoken word poetry. Like poetry in general, I can understand there being, and by the way, this is, I mean, the whole poetry as a publishing, poetry as an industry with all of its different perturbations, publishing, as in the poetry press, like advertising, poetry in adverts, poetry as an underground like event thing, etc. Within all of this, I don't think it's actually like primarily important to open mic performers and people who want to be participating in poetry at whatever level as a hobby or an amateur thing. It's not important because you get the things that are important by osmosis. You don't need to know actively that, Mark Smith was important in starting the slam scene. You don't need to know about, sort of core poetry nights that were very important communities for the people, because the benefits of them, the good things. This is the thing I'm taking from Islam, right? There is an idea in Islam where you do good and you throw it into the sea. If your intentions are pure, then it will come back to you and it will be in the world. You don't need to, if your intentions were impure, it will die. Yeah. It will go away. And that's fine. And I think that that's really important to make the distinction, because unless you're doing it or unless you have a professional interest, unless you have an academic interest or a serious academic interest, then no, you don't need to know all the history and all the details, because you don't need to. I think personally, I can only speak for me, I'm a nerd for this. I think it's really cool. So I love it, but you don't need to. Hell no.
Whilst obviously, again, I think it's definitely a vibe of knowing the history is, I think it's a useful tool to do. And if you have the time and energy to do it, I think it's worth doing. I mean, you see how many nights are kind of trying to do new stuff, and in some level of X did that beforehand. You should, if you want to do something like that, maybe look at these nights that already exist, like the amount of people that don't know Tung Fu exists. I'm not saying that Tung Fu are the only person that does music and poetry, but they don't know Tung Fu and they want to see music and poetry. It's that happens. The scene has so many things. The scene has tried different things, and look at what the scene has done. There's been so many things that have gone. It'd be good for you to know that. It'd be good if people knew this stuff, but it's definitely not a thing that you are required to know. But it's the thing of it would be knowing your history. Knowing the history is cool. You could, that did happen. Oh, that would be a fun.
Yeah. I mean, look, the obvious quote is, a people without a history is like a tree without roots. And if you think that your spoken word night that you're starting or whatever, or the one that you go to, is important enough to be important to you, and if you think that it has a history, then you should want to know that history, right? To that point, I found a couple of years ago, 2022, I wrote a list of every spoken word night I can think of, and this is a thing that happens all the time in poetry. Everyone's trying to aggregate what's going on because nights are born and die so quickly. So many different nights in different parts of the country, so many different nights that cater to different types of people, faith-based nights, etc., faith-based nights, interest-based nights, all this sort of stuff. I have a list, and I'm going to try to read through as many of the London spoken word nights, and also, very importantly, Facebook groups.
So just London ones, yeah?
Yeah, cool. Just London, because, I mean, also, I'm not going to speak on other ones.
Tyrone's going to go through his head and try and count how many he's featured at.
Okay, fine. But the reason why I want to do this as well is for posterity, for there to be a record somewhere of this, apart from just the files that go about, right? So, yeah, Spoken Word London. This was the OG open mic only, because it had been running for about 12, 13 years. But
my challenge you, I feel like Poetry Unplugged is the OG.
Yeah, well, that's the second on the list. Yeah, Poetry Unplugged.
That's my only question, the OG.
Yeah, another that's been obviously running at the Poetry Cafe for maybe 15, 16 years at this point. Early 2000s. I had
some time at Betsy Trotwood as well.
Fine,
because Cafe was closed, naturally.
Of course. So Spoken Word London, Poetry Unplugged, a Boomerang. Okay, actually, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide a short, 2-3 word description of the type of night it is afterwards, right? Yes. So Spoken Word London, pure open mic, held at Vogue Fabric in Dalston. There was a point where that was weekly, I do believe.
Yeah, I tried it weekly and then it did not work.
It did not work. But yeah, that was a very, very regular night, very long running. Fortnightly. This was over 10 years running. Poetry Unplugged, pure open mic, at the Poetry Cafe.
And that was weekly.
That was weekly for many years. Boxed In, that was one of my favourite poetry nights. That was obviously the Box Park in Shoreditch. That was open mic, but sometimes features. It was great, hosted by a team of like Sean Mahoney, Cecilia Knapp, Yomi Sade. I'm really sorry if I'm forgetting people, but this is the nature of the thing. The Genesis Slam. This is the longest running regular slam. Sorry, the longest running regular 3-round slam in London.
Yeah.
So that was hosted when I first initially heard of it by Sarah Hirsch, but before they moved away. Okay, and then we're just getting into all the nights that I could list, right? Once Upon a Mic, that was running as an open mic and feature night, but that was a blended lineup. So it would be, you might get bloody like magicians, musicians, comedians, poets. Extra Second London, which is still running.
Now by Jamal.
Yeah, Now by Jamal. That was like a poetry night.
With conversations and discussions afterwards.
Yep, conversation and discussions. Jaw Dance. Jaw Dance was run for years for free and still is at the Rich Mix by Apples and Snakes. That's purely feature. That's feature and open mic. Word Up London, regular night that was running. Word on the Street was a hip hop and poetry night run by Shay D. There was Rise Up London that was in Northwest London. That was in, I want to say Harlesden. Desiree and Hannah Gordon were involved in that. You had Rise Up that was running from about 2018, 2019 by Poet Curious in King's Cross.
Yeah.
Hammer and Tongue. Hammer and Tongue had many different ones. So I want to say Waterloo, Camden.
Where Hackney's the long ongoing one. The Camden one became the Waterloo one, but then ended.
Yep.
Whereas Hackney's been the non-stop one and still gets stupidly busy audiences to this day. And one of like with Genesis, one of the few poetry. I'm going to fucking say it. One of the few poetry events that gets a crowd almost no matter what.
Yep, exactly. They just consistently run. And Hammer and Tongue are doing great. They also do a Poets versus Rappers event. And Hammer and Tongue have chapters all across the country, and they contribute. The winners of that go through to the National Slam. And so essentially, the Hammer and Tongue heats are in every city, but there's like 3 or 4 heats in London. So there's that one. There's Tongue Fu, which you mentioned earlier. That is a improv music and poetry nights, features only. That's been running for many years. I want to say since at least 2007-8 by Chris Redmond and the crew. Chocolate Poetry Club, that started, I want to say like 2017. It's been going a long time.
And it started off as a one-off, which Paul Point was just doing because he'd just come back from traveling and went to do a fun little event.
Exactly.
He liked it so much he did it more regularly, and then it became what it was.
Absolutely, yep. There's Inua Ellam's Rap Party, which is
as the day of recording, it's on tonight.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a basically a poet reads a poem and then picks 2 hip hop songs to play after, and then you do your poem in reference to
poem is inspired by hip hop as well.
Exactly, that's been running for many years as well. There was Burn After Reading, which was a collective, but also had an event in 7 Dials, I do believe.
We started off in Bethnal Green, then moved to 7 Dials afterwards. Yeah.
So there was Fine Line Society, which had, by the way, the best posters in this whole scene are always done by Spike Zephaniah Stevenson. It's not a question, especially in London. But humble brag, he also did the artwork for my book. Hilarious. Fine Line Society, that had that was again open mic and features. Forget What You Heard About Spoken Word. That's sort of 2013 or earlier through to 2017. That's the OG greatest hosts and where I found myself. Nowhere Nights that Oliver Cable was running. That was just a feature night, but with musicians as well.
Which has now become Grooveverse.
Yeah, which has now become Grooveverse. But Oliver Cable no longer runs it.
Yeah, now it's done by Ted Temple.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So also that night, Grooveverse. Toulouse-Lautrec is a great venue for music and poetry. Speak Equal, which was run by London Queer Writers. That was a monthly open mic and feature night based around, obviously, celebrating queerness and queer identity. Veranda, which is Born Free's open mic night. Born Free is the collective run by Malachi Sargent and Belinda Jawi. That's been running for a very long time. I want to say they had their 9-year anniversary now, so it's 2023, so 9 years, 2014. Flow Vortex is run by the Flow Assist, who obviously is a Grammy nominated neo soul artist and poet. They initially ran the Flow Vortex in Dalston 2017 took hiatus and came back. Now is a hub for the Flow Poets, who is essentially a loose collective of artists who they regularly write together and perform together, run by the Flow Assist. That's great and it's still running. There was a night called Joyride, Spit and Polish, which was Harry Baker and Chris's night.
Joyride separate, Spit and Polish separate night. Yeah.
Yep, separate night. There was a night called Spoken Not Stirred out in East London in Barking Dagenham, run by Dowda. Poetry at the Pad is what I was running. Vocals and Verses, another long running night, which is mostly music and poetry, very just like great like soul, like singer songwriters. Restless Feature were running a night. Poets Verses was a series of nights. You had Brave Poets, which is a music. It's a live music event with selected artists, but they also booked lots of poets and have done because they have them improvising live with the band. Poets Dictionary was a regular event that was running. There was a night called Beans, Rhymes and Life run out in Enfield, which is a hip hop and poetry night, open mic. I think they had features that was run by Benny Diction. There is Verses, which is VERSES Verses, which is run by Nash and Jack Hutchcraft and the crew there. Wait, Nash, Nats and Jack, yeah. They run that at Bardonia. That's a feature and open mic night. Also, they had a night at the Roundhouse Festival. Chill Pill, which was run by Raymond Antrobus,
Mr. G.
Mr. G.
Deanna was a part of it as
Deanna,
well.
And that was a almost, I think, quarterly night.
Something like that, yeah.
Yep. There's the Anti-Slam, which is another, basically, worst poet wins, worst performance wins. That's been running a long time as well. That's an infrequent, I want to say, like, maybe they do it every season, just
at the moment, they used to do it across the UK in different cities. Mm-hmm. I think nowadays, they basically, because of Dan and Paula, who run it, doing their own different career paths. They basically do it now just at Edinburgh Fringe and a London Halloween special.
Yep, exactly.
Which by the time of this episode being out might have already happened. I don't know. I don't know when this is coming out.
And then I'll just there's like 4 or 5 more, but they're important to say. She Growls, which was essentially like, femme.
Still is.
Yeah, yeah, I was going to say still is. I keep on saying in the past tense. But yeah, that's also been running for many, many years. And that's an open mic and feature night. That's great. Ho Noir, which was run by Anita Barton Williams. That was like a black and brown women focused, aka they booked black and brown women, and it was for black and brown women and by black and brown women, focused night, incredibly like sort of, if you know about like sort of like womanist like theory and politics, that's what it was. Realized it was fantastic. So many great nights there. Jazz vs Jukebox, which was another basically live jazz and poetry hybrid. Bring Your Own Bars, which is still running today. That is in northwest London, Wembley, I do believe. That's a poetry, so that's a feature and open mic night. There's about 4 nights called Speakeasy, to be honest. That was a regular one. And then, that is the big long list I had in 2022 of spoken word nights that were running. And there's so many I've forgotten, and there's so many new ones that have started since then. I didn't even mention Penting, which is my own night.
So, like, just to go on the back of that, with Tyrone, without any physical aids on him, but trying to see what he remembers off the top of his head, like nights that have either started or are going or weren't on, not say weren't on this, but like other nights to be aware of, whether they were part of one scene in the past or are of it now. Current ones, for example, there's Everything Poetry Night run by Ellie, which is features and open micers. There is the Goddamn Poetry Jam, because Kid Nancy can't stop hosting nights, so he does that at the Fiddler's Elbow every month. You've also got Poetry LGBT by names is
Adrena, I think their name is.
Yes, that's I'm bad at names. That's been going on for years.
Hidden Literature at Grow in Hackney, they do a regular night as well.
Yeah, you've got Shits and Scribbles in Peckham. You've obviously got Mind Over Matter that was doing a lot of things. You've got
and each of these nights had like a regular set of 20 to 30 people who would turn up to them for at least like a year,
So I'll just a quick Right to Speak is another one in Barnet.
Yeah, that's run by
Yossi and
Tyler Luke Cunningham. Yeah,
the fact that I'm worrying how many people's names I'm struggling with off the top of my head.
But look,
like there's even more than just those ones, and like
Yeah, and so
Poets Palace is another one. Say Events is another one that seems relatively new.
Yep.
Liv Fowler does Rhymes and Stitches, another new one. There's just a lot of events, and I guess almost to one of the things that and this is where Tyrone goes into Statler and Waldorf, not even Statler and Waldorf, this old man shouting at the cloud thing, is that like there's so many events and I love that. There's not as much overlap in the audience as I would like. Some of it I fully understand is location based. I mean, just of the ones you've mentioned, you've got Right to Speak, which is out in Barnet. There's and like I won posters in Hackney. It's so hard to try and promote an event in Hackney to a crowd in Barnet because the logistics of going from Barnet to Hackney are a bitch.
Yeah.
You have to go back from Barnet to Camden,
and then
Camden to Hackney. It's like, and that's just assuming you live in Barnet.
Yeah.
People that go to that night probably may not live in Barnet, may live near Barnet. So
and this is a very important point because I could list poetry nights again, even more that I haven't mentioned in London for another 10 minutes, right? And it'll be incredibly boring. I'm not going to do it, thank God. But it illustrates the point of what delineates these poetry nights. For instance, let's have a couple more. There was Rumi's Cave, which is Macrew, which is run as a Soho Theatre. These are nights primarily for like British Asian like audiences and like Muslim audiences, because that's who they are, and it's great. And there's so many different like pockets of like faith-based nights.
I will regret not mentioning things like Off the Chest, which is celebrating its 4th year.
Yeah, Off the Chest. We can continue to bring these names of nights up, but there's all of this.
So many, it's the audience forum, and I say audience in as much as like the people attending it, whether they be the open micers themselves or the crowd to watch this stuff. You'll get pockets like we had with Jake, Daisy, Joel, Kaz, all of them who will be like,
Spike, Iris, Dean.
You'll have that group that's like, cool, we're going to try and go to as many events as we can do, and you'll get there's meant like I look at nowadays like half the process audience are you all go to events together, and like there's a lot of groups in that sense that will do that, and obviously there was a limitation by again like a location, but like it definitely feels that there's not as much connecting the event as there could be.
I feel it.
Paper Tiger Poetry gets a completely different audience to some of these other Lost Souls events gets a completely different audience, and there is some level of good that each people and group can find their crowd, their audience, their people. Like, not to say it's just that, but Paper Tiger Poetry seems to get more of the older poets. It gets more of the adults, late 30s, 40s, going fit to 50s, and ever. And like each crowd seems to get its own thing. Like I think Spoken Word London, whilst it was for everyone, relatively young audience, and that was often
also again, relatively queer audience, and you love that.
I mean, poetry's queer in general.
Very true.
And I know it's not just queer, and there are some straight. Some of my best friends are straight, kind of vibe, but like
some of my best friends are straight. Some of my best friends are white.
But like, I do wish there was more connection with some of these nights and more working with it, especially because the level like so many of these nights clash, and once they get locations a part of it, something feels like. But you're clashing. You're 20 minutes away from each other.
Yeah. So with this, I think there has been a de facto fracturing of the specific type of tightness of the interconnectedness of the spoken word scene circa London spoken word scene circa 2013 to like 2020, right? And it's partially pandemic because there weren't regular nights anymore, but it's partially like. It's very weird and it feels uncomfortable to say it, but because there was an awareness of like the money and the finance that came in, all of a sudden you could get your nationwide advert, you could get your viral video, you could go into a sort of a modeling or a high fashion scene, and it became almost like, I think about when would poets from different parts of the scene, whether that's geographically or like stylistically, or whether it's like faith-based or specific interest-based, where would they all come together outside of the regular night And there were moments in the calendar when that would happen. It would happen at the Fringe, and you might have to go to Scotland, but you'd know a whole bunch of people from London.
It would happen at Fringe. It would happen at Hammer and Tongue Hackney when you get everyone down for that.
Yeah, but it would happen at the Roundhouse Slam.
Yeah.
It would happen at sometimes the UK Slam, because it was so, and then the Genesis Slam final maybe, and then obviously some festivals if everyone's there. But I think those types of things. One, I don't think it's necessarily important that people who aren't as connected to what that has meant for the poetry, I don't think it's important necessarily that they have to venerate these moments, but there do need to be these moments. They do need to function somewhere. And I don't want it to be...
You don't need to continually keep popping up the UK Poetry Slam, but it needs to be something in its place at the very least. There always needs to be something that brings people
and like it might not be a slam, and like oftentimes it's things like someone's birthday event where they'll book 30 people and it'll come down, or there'll be a launch where they'll book a whole bunch of people, but it's that sort of feedback loop of having a community outside. Because hold on, just one second. Because we don't have like we technically work together, right? But we don't have Christmas parties
that's
or
literally
whatever.
what I was going to go into in the thing of like,
so there to be those moments.
There's a part of me that feels almost, I feel a little bit guilty at times in that I'm not doing that, but also it's not my it's not my responsibility to do that. I do not have to be responsible for making this London scene grow. I feel a little bit responsible, and this is where we can go back to your legacy thing as well as we kind of wrap up this overly long section. But like, there's a part of me that feels guilty and responsible that I must be the one to keep the scene going, given how much I've documented it, how long I've been a part of it. And I don't want, without trying to not be vain, but also knowing where I am, a level of like, I am a decent factor in the London scene. I'm not quite the history books fully, but a level I've documented a lot of it. I have been responsible for a lot of the open mic scene in recent years.
The joke is, if you have a picture of yourself performing poetry in London, what are the percentages that Tyrone Lewis took that picture?
So like, there's a part of me that feels responsible that I must be doing something, and especially if I'm and part of that is the burden I've given myself of I've chosen, well, I'm going to fucking document this stuff and keep doing it, and I must keep being the one do something differently. And like you mentioned the Christmas party stuff, like I love that there was a 1 year when Dan Simpson did his
couple years
doing the Christmas party thing, and there's always a part of me that's like, well, I can do. Well, if Dan's not doing it, I could. Why not me be the person to do that? And like, it's almost a sad and depressing thing. If I know I'm using those words very harshly, but the sad and depressing thing of there was an idea that we've been having with protests or just in general events of like, what happens if we do a quarterly? We're just going to have a space, come down to the space, and we hang out. That feels so not, again, there's part of me that feels like that feels sad that we're going to have to plan time just to hang out and not do anything, but also...
No, but that's what it takes. Yeah. And like, it's a two-step thing, right? Because it's not only that you do it, but it's then how do you do it, right? So if you imagine it almost like there's an infinity between 0 and 1, and then there's an infinity between 1 and the highest number you can think of, right? So that's the difference between not doing something and doing something, and then doing something and how do you do something. And I think that like there's no hard and fast overarching physical organization that manages all this stuff, and that is completely right. It should be like that.
Like for as much as I want Apples and Snakes to do more, there's level of this is not on them to do. They are doing different things, and they're doing them. I mean, for the most part, they're doing their things well. Yeah,
and also they're the reason that 90% of poets get their first job.
I could like for all the things I can definitely question on Apples and Snakes, because they do at times feel a bit insular. For example, there's there's only so much they can do.
And also like, look, they've been running for like 40 plus years now. And what they have is the active network connections to schools and to organizations and to artists and everything. And long may they be so. But there is a different way to organize a dynamically independent and somewhat still underground, despite being mainstream, set of events and peoples. And yes, what I think is necessary and will always happen is people will always find that place to come together outside of just an event. But recently it's been filled by like like award shows, or it's been filled.
I can't go into an award show talk here because I'm
Yeah,
going to get myself in trouble.
exactly, and that's a whole other thing. But it's like, it's like, right, how? But because that right there is the crux of the issue. Because how do we value what we do on our own terms and in our own like spaces, like in spaces that we own and that we define and that we control? Because it's like, you know, you can write your poetry commission for your advertising agency, and you can get paid incredibly well. You can brand yourself in a way which makes it easy for you to sell XYZ idea of poetry, and I don't blame any of that. But like, I feel that is speaking to a weird type of individualism in how we interact with each other as poets, that almost is coming before the importance of seeing each other and other communities as people. And I think that is the same problem as why don't people go to other people's nights as much as as you say, why isn't there as much crossover in audiences as before? The flip side to this, though, is weirdly enough, I think poetry audiences are in some ways expanding and deepening, because poetry nights, people have realized that it's not just enough to have a poetry night. You need to have a good show. And like Grooveverse is a great example of this. Tung Fu is a great example of this. Poets being more comfortable going up to music jams is another great part of this. But it's a flip side, because the feeling of going to a poetry night that you don't know, but maybe you know the feature or whatever, and feeling welcomed into it is a really cool thing. And I had that feeling at loads of poetry nights for years. And I think that there's something special about that, because it's like going to a different, you might be traveling to a different area of London, great. Might be meeting a whole bunch of people you might never met before, great. You might be hearing a whole bunch of things you've never heard before, great. And I think that is a good thing to do. So I want more of that, and also want us to be able to value ourselves on our own terms, in our own spaces. And obviously this happens in fits and starts with, you know, poetry award shows. The Forward Prize has recently announced it's got like a spoken word video section. Great, love that. But that's Forward. And we don't want to be co-opted by, for want of a better phrase, big poetry. Like, you know, the old chin stroking institutions of historically pale, male, stale literary stuff. We want the stuff which is queer, the stuff which is fucking minoritized, the stuff which is othered. So yeah, I want those audiences that are deepening now, those othered audiences that are deepening now, I don't want them to be siloed. I want us to be able to be together. Imagine if we had a new Dialectics of Liberation conference at the Roundhouse that brought together not only poets from across London and across the country and across the world, but across different experiences and ages and languages, all that sort of stuff. And it does happen in fits and starts. And we are also all the ones that make it happen by what we do. Yeah, maybe it will happen, maybe it won't. It's also not, the scene doesn't live or die by it. The scene lives regardless. And that's why I'm like, all power to all the new nights who are doing great stuff and bringing in audiences and like doing what they do. I see all of it and I'm glad of all of it. And I know that the history of spoken word nights in London continues through these nights. And that's great. So like, I'm all for it.
Just before I forget, because I will hate myself if I don't at least mention these on thing. Word of Mouth, other one. Big Queer Poetry is another one. And also Stand Up and Slam, another one as well, which was an incredible one. Before we go into our last section, which will be slow fire questions, just because we were talking about legacy and you said you're going to come back to it. With all this said and done, how do you view your legacy on this scene?
That's a really fun question, because it implies that my legacy is like in any way fixed.
Well, okay, at this moment in time.
Yeah, I think that, okay, so what do we mean by legacy? Like what I think a far nicer way.
Hamilton starts playing here.
Oh my, good reference. I was surprised. It's been a long time since you made a Hamilton reference, Tyrone. I miss it. Yeah, I think so. Actually, what I mean is, so like influence, right? I think that's very important. What influence have you had, and you know, on whom and for to what ends, right? I'm really proud of Penting and how it operated as a space for Black people, by Black people, and everyone welcome. I'm so proud that for like, you know, maybe 2 years, two and a half years of like really at its peak, we were booking and paying Black and brown people almost exclusively, with like maybe 3-4 exceptions, who were great poets, utterly fantastic performers. And we were putting them to an audience who were invested in what we wanted to do, like, you know, our ideals. They were interested in poetry, and they were also like, they were discerning. They were an intelligent audience, you know. I'm so proud that part of my influence and legacy, I still don't like the word legacy, I'll use influence. Part of the influence that I've been able to have is to be able to curate that space, to book those artists, and then to carry that message in what we do. And yeah, like there's lots of people who have come to Penting, done their thing, felt comfortable, and have gone on to do great things. And it's not just because they were at Penting that they've gone on to do great things, but it's that there was a night or a series of nights that reminded them that they have the potential, they have the excellence, they have they have everything they need to be as great as they can be. And sometimes an open mic is a thing that you do to give permission to people. And that's what I'm really proud of. I've been able to remind people of their own skill and give them the permission to do it loads. I'm proud that we put Penting in the Bush Theatre, which is like a historical place for Black theatre and like Black theatre writing in London. Very proud of that. I'm proud of the sheer amount of gigs I've done, and the faux encyclopedic, autodidactical mapping of time and space of UK poetry that I've been able to, time and space and craft that I've been able to like map out in my head of poetry. I'm very proud of that. I'm also proud of how I make people feel. Do you know what I mean? I get messages sometimes, and all of this has taken place in the context of Boyega Odubanjo, who passed away recently, who was one of the best poets I've ever had the joy of hearing. He first came to Poetry at the Pad, I think in whenever it was 2016, because we had it in Dagenham, and he lived around there when he was coming back from uni. And like, I get messages from people like Boyega all the time being like, or when we speak to friends I have like that, who are mutual poets, who are semi-professional or professional, and are also tend to be creative people, I get messages that say, oh, I remember when I featured at Penting, or I came down to Penting and I had such a great time. I really felt held and treasured there. Or they say things like, the audience is the best audience that I've ever had. Or they say just anything they say that affirms that they had a good experience. I feel so treasured to know that poetry has had that what I've been able to facilitate has had that effect on people. And I'll like maybe 2 more points on this. The sheer ability to know that like poetry and having a community around you, so the London poetry scene or whatever scene you were in, it saves lives. Like it actually does. Like, I know because it saved mine on many occasions. Sometimes I might not have spoken to anyone for 2-3 days if I'm struggling with mental health or depression, but I knew I could drag myself to, I don't know, let's say Boxed In and have a good hug with somebody who like knows me and wants me to be well. And I think that's never to be understated. Like just the act of it. And then the last thing, which is like writing and what I actually like, how writing, deliverance style, and how I write. It's not too arrogant to say that there have been popular and regular styles of writing spoken word, and this comes through a lot through the collectives and the sort of the organised institution systems where there are tutors who are teaching classes, so the Roundhouse Poetry Collective, Barbican Young Poets, etc. And all of a sudden, everyone starts sounding like XYZ poet. When Jacob Samler Rose is teaching, everyone starts to sound like Jacob Samler Rose, but through a filter in their own way, which is, you know, there's pros and cons.
The
and
Polar Bear year was...
Yeah, the Polar Bear year. So you get people like Jack Rook and Cecilia Knapp and...
Maria Ferguson was also part of that trio,
Maria Ferguson, Ben Norris a bit. Like these people who, they learn how to sound like themselves through sounding like the people that taught them, which is great. That's how we all start to sound. But it does mean that there are tendencies in styles of writing. A thing I'm proud of is that I feel and I know that I've been able to adapt myself and take the best of each of these different styles of spoken word that have been popular at different times. So kind of like classic East London slam style. I can do a slam, East US kind of Chicago, like American, like big energy slam style. I can do it. I've been in and around adjacent with collectives for ages, and it's made me more aware of different techniques and performances on the page that I can now write in styles, and I love that. Shouts out to Roundhouse Poetry Collective 2019 and 2020. They are my soul, as is the Obsidian Foundation, as is Born Free. It's where I do some of my most important growing. Poetry with music, be it jazz, be it like grime, flows, hip hop. I can, with some difficulty, but I can do so many different styles, and I'm really proud of that, and it will never stop because I love poetry too much. I'll stop there.
But we are now coming to the final section of the podcast where we will now do slow fire questions. I will arbitrarily say we're going to go through 5 of these. But basically, we've there's an old episode on our YouTube where you can see PJ doing quick fire questions regularly. Now we're going to slow it down and have some fun with it. So
let's do it.
Can you give me a number between 1 and 100, please?
Oh my lord. I'm really sorry. Bill and Ted got me 69, dude.
Nice. What is your takeaway of choice?
Takeaway of choice? I think pizza. Yeah, probably like pepperoni pizza or a meat feast like pizza. Yeah, that's me.
Nice.
Yeah, indeed. I think, so if I was to rank them, right, I think it'll be pizza first.
Yeah.
Then probably Thai. I really like Thai food, like sweet and sour, all this sort of. Yeah, really like just like the palate. Like I like the kind of brightness of the palate.
Yeah.
Like a lot of like sort of like pineapple and carrot and like sweet kind of like honey things as well. That and then just like a mixture across like 3rd, 4th, 5th between like Chinese, Indian takeaways. And then, yeah, whatever. Top 4. Done.
Strong. Now a number, please.
Wait, actually, I'll tell a complete lie. In that 5th spot, and it's only because there can be variations. It can either be very, very good or very, very bad. It's like African takeaway food, like getting like, like some West African like jollof and, like plantain and things like that. I've been burned before with buying food specifically because my mum cooks it and I cook it so well.
Almost that vibe of like it's hard to get a bad pizza in that kind of a way, but bad Africans, like all that, it happens. And
and this is the same for like, all of the other different types of food I mentioned, like Indian food and Chinese food. But because I like know how to cook African food like at home, I would very rarely like buy it as like a takeout thing.
There.
Yeah.
Cool. Another number, please.
42. The answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Nice. Will poetry ever be mainstream?
Good question, and I've developed my answer on this since I did it at Quickfire Questions, and I think the better way to reframe the question is, where will the mainstream need poetry? Yeah? And I think that it comes down to that idea of authenticity is a currency right now. Attention is a currency right now. So if we look at why so many fashion brands, luxury brands, even political brands are looking to, by that I mean like, the Labour Party booked a bunch of poets to do poetry for them before an election in 2019, I think. So like, I think that that's the more interesting question. And I think that the answer is, in the darkest, most extreme, most tense, most, in a corporation or maybe a state's mind, in the most risk, like in the riskiest moments, that's when poetry actually becomes very valuable, because to them, poetry is incredibly low risk, incredibly low investment, and can be incredibly high reward because it aligns them politically and ideologically with all of these ideas that they want to be associated with. Freedoms and equality and equity, and we want to live a good life.
It's basically fancier copywriting. Is the
In it, though.
Simpleness of it all.
Yeah.
Like I think when I was talking to Demi about this was the best idea of it. The thing of like poetry arguably is already mainstream. It's used in so many things. Like I think the more,
weddings, funerals,
like the intention behind the question is arguably level of what is when will the poetry as we know it be mainstream? Which I don't. Which I think arguably is, and that's why you can parody it. I don't think people will seek it out the same way they seek out music.
No, but
it still has its place.
Yeah, and also I think that it's more that for the longest time we've wanted to have a integrated and secure like infrastructure of the open mic as like a foundational entry level point to poetry, because there's so many different ways in. Obviously, you've got social media and online stuff. We don't need to talk about Rupi Kaur and like so many of the super popular what are being derogatorily what are basically slandered in a derogatory way, insta poetry. That's a way in. Maybe you find your way in through film, or you find your way in through your imam or your spiritual leader. You find your way through a random viral video, whatever it is. I don't care how people get in, but I care that when they get in, there is an understandable and agreed upon function and like way of doing things. And yeah, you can divert from that, obviously, because similar to jazz, you need to know the rules to break the rules. But I think it is important that there is like a standardized thing.
Cool. Now a number, please.
17.
17. We are going for comedy or drama?
Comedy. That
was a thought process behind that.
Yeah, no, I love stand-up so much. And I think that, again, when I say spoken word, weirdly enough, in my mind, I do tend to include like even like video essays are a type of spoken word to me, because essentially, can you deliver your thing to camera verbally, physically? But also spoken word encompasses stand-up, it encompasses commentary, it encompasses even like narration in film is the type of thing. And so yeah. And with all these things, I will say that I actually watch stand-up comedy and like stand-up comedy specials way more than I watch like drama films. You know what I mean? If it was, so for me, comedy. I love comedy so much. It's the art of being able to use comedy to say and do something that keeps me coming back to stand-up.
Nice. Yeah. Lower number, please.
61.
Perfect. Planes, trains, or automobiles?
Trains.
Why train, man?
So in my family, my great uncle basically was a train engineer and was very important in setting up the transport systems of Ghana in the sort of like 40s, 50s, 60s. Like, he studied in the UK with many of the, upwardly mobile professional class of Ghanaians at the time. There's a long history of Ghanaians coming to the UK, literally going back literally hundreds of years. But like, I think that a thing that makes it important for me, it feels just connected to my history. Like I feel it. Like my dad got the train to work every day. I live about 200 meters in Chelmsford from the viaduct which carries the train. And I just think when you fly, one, it's bare hassle. It's just so long to have to get to the airport early and to do all the faff with all your liquids and that. And you don't actually get to see the landscape that you're traveling through. You just travel over it. And obviously, very, very, very bad for the environment, etc. as well. And it's not like we're flying in the 70s where you had like different experiences. It's just like Ryanair and EasyJet, and like, capitalism has got its claws into the way that the airline travel industry works, especially because if you're traveling luxury, fine, you can like travel luxury, but who's got the money? That's how they make all their money. They lose money on all of the regular flyers. They only make money on like, commercial and luxury stuff. So yeah, basically the airline industry, I have a lot of trouble with it, and I don't like the experience so much. And cars are fine. It goes trains, defo, then automobiles, then planes.
And then lastly, give me one more number, please.
93.
Put 93. Goal for next year.
Great question. My goal for next year is to have enough poems and or writing in whatever format it be to offer a manuscript to a publisher again. Nice. Because it's been so long since have felt that I've had a regular body of work in whatever format. I started out as a film journalist as well. I was writing films when I was in first year, writing film reviews in first year, second year of uni, and I would write film reviews. I would write like 2 a week for like a year and a half, and they'd be published, and I would do them for my own joy. And I miss that feeling of regularly writing and just being in the habit. And it's not to say that I don't write regularly now. I do. It's small things. But I like the idea of having a body of work. And I do have ideas for them, and I am actively doing them, and I will achieve this. I'm saying this for posterity, so that when I watch this back, I have to acknowledge that I said this, and therefore I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah. If I say it out loud, it has to be done now.
Exactly. So shall it be written, so shall it be done. So yeah, that's my goal for next year. From a professional standpoint and a career standpoint and and that standpoint. But the more important thing I want to achieve next year, I think, is to be a better friend and a better person in the lives of the people whom I love. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's because I have had I've recently got like a 9-to-5 job, which is a massive change for me. Before then, I was a full-time poet for about a year and a half. Before then, I was essentially a semi-professional poet for about 4 or 5 years, which meant I was working, a hospitality job and then gigging in my spare time, but I was getting paid. And now it's a different skill set because I'm working 9 to 5 and I'm doing poetry to a way in which it's a serious endeavor for me while also being a hobby. But I need to bring back the love of the hobby into the seriousness of the endeavor, because that's what gives me, personally, I can't talk to anybody else, but that's what gives me longevity, being able to focus on the fun of it, focus on the hobby, the interest, the love of it, and then the money may come, it may not. I don't care. It's not about that. The value is not purely monetary. And that's what I want to achieve by next year. I want to be better as a person in the lives of the people who love me, because I actually now have some money to my name, and I can that's very important. And then also, I want to have a body of work, a manuscript that I can feel soulful about and feel like it soothes and feeds my soul. And then also, I can take it to a publisher and get it published in a way which it feels like external to me, and it can reach out into the world, and it can be an accurate representation of one side of me and a thing that I thought at one time.
Perfect. And now with that is the end of our podcast. So let's do the sign-offs and all the hosting and all that admin stuff. That's still part of it, as we've already discussed.
Plugs.
With that, you've got a camera there. If you want to be found online, where can they find you?
So I recently got kicked off Twitter.
I mean, to be fair, we're all jumping ship soon.
Exactly. But I've taken this as the impetus to reassess and redo how I appear digitally and online. So in between this episode recording and this episode being released, I will have done a bit of restructuring of my social media. with all of that said, you can find me on Instagram at Repeat Beat Poet. You can go to Instagram. That has my link tree, and that has the important list of everywhere where you can find me. That includes my work doing radio. So I do a monthly radio show called Loosey Goosey, LOOSEEGUSI.substack.com. That's where you can find the accompanying blogs with track lists and stories behind the songs as well. Also, I still am online as Penting. So if you want to follow the history of Penting, you can go to Penting Poetry on Instagram as well. I do another regular radio show every month on Soho Radio called Imaginary Millions. That is on every fourth Friday from 12 to 2 to 4 GMT. What else do I do? What other ways? I think that's the important stuff. The link tree is the key. The link tree is the thing. Linktree/Repeat Beat Poet. But there is a website coming soon. I've now said it on camera, so it has to happen.
By the time this episode is out, there'll be a website.
Oh, God,
I'm not putting that pressure on you.
Exactly, yeah. So Linktree/Repeat Beat Poet. That is me. Tyrone, it's been an absolute pleasure to do this podcast. I really hope that my rambling was earnest and not just me shouting hot air. I will say, Tyrone, what you have done for documenting the spoken word scene across the UK, while also being a key performer in the spoken word scene in the UK, is phenomenal. I am such a massive fan of Process. I think that it's an invaluable resource for people who want to learn about what spoken word is, and also just to see some great poetry, because so many people get their poetry now through YouTube and through videos. Process has one of the best archives out there. You've also been involved in setting up loads of other people's nights and taking all their footage. So
I am the keeper of all the poetry. So if you want to know all about the poetry, follow Process and all the things. Again, Linktree is the key. We've got that on all the things and whatnot. I do all these plugs all the time. You can just, again, plug it in. Look at the description. Description is where you can find everything, whether it's YouTube or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Though I don't know why I listen to it other than Spotify and YouTube, because I don't really put it any other places. Anyway, ending this. I know how to do endings because I'm slick and... No, fuck it. I don't know how to do endings. I'm going to steal it from an Irishman. So I love you all now. Now fuck off.
Bye-bye.